good to go? Okay, we'll get started in a minute or two. Welcome to our session on the First Nation Sustainability Development Standards. It's a project that was brought out of Whitefish through the AFN, and Laponite Architects did the standard up. And we're going to have a panel here, which consists of Francis Lapointe from Lapointe Architects, Earl, Commanda, and Deborah Taylor from the First Nation Market Housing Fund, Jennifer Martin from Member 2, and Joanna Recollet as a member from the First Nation that's helped develop the document. They'll be going through their presentation, and if we can, when and if you have questions, there's a mic at the center of the room. If you can go to that so that the webcast can be, they can hear you for those on the webcast. We'll be taking a break at 2:45 for 15 minutes, as this is a two-part session. And I'll let the panel go ahead and do up their presentation.
Thanks very much, Joey. We want to say welcome and thank you to the elders and chiefs and delegates, and a special thank you to the organizing committee for allowing the First Nations Market Housing Fund to host this panel and also to be a sponsor of this conference. I'm especially pleased to have the opportunity to be back here. For the past few years, we've had a conflicting conference that occurred at the same time as the Northern Conference. And so Earl has dutifully been coming, but we're really pleased to be here, and certainly pleased to be here to talk about the standards and to bring Francis and Jen and Joanna along, because they've all been so intimately involved in the development of the standards. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just orienting some of you who may be new to the fund to what it is we do, and then I'm going to turn it over, and one by one we're going to have a chance for you to hear not only about the theory behind the standards and how they were put together, but also to hear from the community reps and what the parts of the standards that so far they've embraced in their community, and the challenges they've faced, the successes they've had, and what more they plan to do going forward. So a couple of words about the fund. We do always begin each presentation with our vision statement. It happens that this young man is from Member 2 and was standing on his lot when it was being cleared as he was about to own his first home. But this is the vision statement that was developed by the trustees and the staff at the fund, and it's what motivates us in the work that we do every day with First Nations across Canada. So we are a non-profit. We are overseen by 9 trustees, and we have 11 staff, so we're quite nimble, we're quite small. We work out of an office in Ottawa. We were created to support arrangements between First Nations and lending institutions so that people living on reserve across Canada would have the chance to have their own homes, or to renovate a home that they already own, or that a council might decide to provide some rental housing for community members or for others who they decide can live on their land. We did receive $300 million from the Government of Canada back in 2007, and we've turned that into more than $340 million, the idea being that it will be there forever for First Nations who wish to have homes on communal land. And so far we've been able to turn that $300 million into more than $725 million, so that's credit that's been approved for First Nation communities for people to be able to borrow to pay for their own homes or to pay for the renovation of homes they already have. Okay, sorry. Thank you. When we were created as a new tool to help support additional homes on reserve. and of course on settlement lands where it's appropriate. It could be for home ownership, it could be for rental, it could be for renovation. The idea was we weren't replacing anything that existed out there for a First Nation, but that we were complementing what was already in place. Key to what we do is respect the communal nature of land, and we work with First Nation governments, so those are who our clients are. This was a First Nation idea. It was developed with input from the Assembly, as Joey mentioned at the outset, but also from communities and organizations across the country, and to be able to develop criteria that would work for both First Nations and lending institutions when the fund opened its doors in 2008. As of December 31st, 168 First Nations had chosen to work with us. As of today, that number's 172. So since Christmas, we've received another application from British Columbia and 3 more applications from Ontario First Nations. We've approved 79 of those applications for a total of $725 million in credit. And we've approved another 43 First Nations on capacity building only, and so those are First Nations working toward qualifying for a loan program. And at that point, we had 46 in the review process, so now we have 50 with the additional 4. We've so far backed 90 loans for housing, various types of housing across Canada, so you'll see that different products that are eligible, and we've been doing all of those across Canada, so refinancing, some doing new construction for home ownership, new construction for rental or rent to own. We've done renovation loans and some purchase of existing homes. In some cases, it's been a member purchasing it from another member, and in some cases, it's been a member purchasing it from the band council. We've also funded more than 80 First Nations to complete more than 750 capacity development initiatives across the country, and those things range from sending people off to individual courses to developing things like land use plans and comprehensive community plans. The way we support investments in communities is twofold. One is through our loan program, or credit enhancement as it's called, where we provide a partial guarantee, and that helps First Nations negotiate the best possible terms and conditions for the nation and for the individual members who are borrowing. So we see tangible benefits coming out of our backing, which include things like lower interest rates for the borrowers, and sometimes reduced program access fees and administrative fee paid to the First Nation. So again, they're negotiated on an individual basis, but we are working with lenders who we consider to be First Nation friendly and who are willing to offer the best possible arrangements. And then we also have our funding for capacity development. And where we get that is that's interest earned on the money that we have invested. So that $300 million is there forever. It's to be capital security because you can't mortgage reserve land. And so the idea is that that money is invested under the direction of our trustees. It earns interest, and we're allowed to use half of our net income for capacity building on an annual basis. We just finished our financial year. Our year end is December 31st, and in 2014 we spent $5.4 million on capacity development in First Nation communities across Canada. So this is a map of the First Nations who have chosen to work with us. You can see that we are now serving every part of the country where First Nations are located. We're very proud to receive our first application from the Northwest Territories during 2014, so we're truly operating from coast to coast to coast, and growing every day, as I say, 4 applications in the past 4 weeks. We only talk about First Nations when they choose to be spoken about, when they choose to come out and be announced and participate in a press release with our chair, John Bocage. And you can see there, we have the latest date of announcement, which was December 9th, 2014, when he had announced several more communities whose chiefs had wanted to participate at that time. There you'll see Member 2 having been there from close to the beginning. Member 2 is number 7 of the 172 First Nations that are working with us, and also a Tikmikshing Anishinaabeg having been approved some 4 years ago to work with us and many communities across the country. So as I mentioned, capacity development, one of the big areas that we are involved in with the 750 initiatives, well, just one of the initiatives was the development of the First Nations Sustainable Development Standards. And as Joey mentioned, it's an idea that came out of Atikameksheng and Anishinaabeg. It was worked on together with the Assembly and Mike Holmes, as well as the fund. And obviously Francis having led the charge in terms of the development. So the fund contracted with Francis Laponite to do the standards, and Atikameksheng very graciously allowed a number of other communities to participate in their development. So you see the volumes on the screen there, and the version that we have here. The standards are right now going through their final translation, so we expect to be able to issue them within this next month. And what we're going to do is turn it over to Francis to begin telling you the story about the development of the standards and how each chapter has been formulated, and then invite Jen and Joanna to tell you about their experience with them.
Thank you, Deborah. So the First Nations Sustainable Development Standards are, as you can see, fairly large documents, over 1,000 pages now. It is a tool. Hi, Jack. It is a tool and a guide and a standard all in one, I guess. So that's one of the reasons why we call it a standard at this point. What's the purpose? It's a guide for First Nation communities to develop their own community and housing design. So I'm going to emphasize own. This is not a document that you should just sort of grab and say, okay, we're done. It's just the beginnings of the process. So developing your own community and housing designs that meet your current and future needs for safer, more durable, sustainable, healthier housing, which reflects each community's unique culture, climate, and environment. So the idea is no more vinyl houses trucked in from God knows where, dropped onto a site and, turn the key over and that's it. The idea is to develop housing that meets your needs, that's for your environment, that's for your people, that reflects your community, your culture, that is designed for your winter and your summer, that kind of thing. That's really the whole goal of the guide. So a little bit of history. We met back in 2012 at the World Indigenous Housing Conference in Vancouver. We met with about a dozen First Nation communities from across Canada there. And at the time we were presenting the project that we were going to start with at Atikameksheng. And everyone said the same thing, ooh, I want one of those too, essentially. So then instead of making a document that is specific to Atikameksheng, we tried to create a more generic product that would be applicable across Canada. And we know Canada is a vast country, lots of differences, East Coast, West Coast, North and South, etc. So it was pretty much of a fairly large challenge right away. The team assembled in earnest in September 2012. We had about 30 people or so meet in our office, and we had a brainstorming session for 2 days, looked at each section and said, what does this mean to you? What would you like to see out of this section? And then we circulated several drafts for almost 2 years, really, to different groups and organizations at different conferences. We had working sessions. We had canvassing done through SurveyMonkey. We talked to technical people. We talked to both First Nation and non-First Nation people, and just got feedback from everyone about what's lacking, what needs improvement, etc. And by June 2014, the Atikameksheng and Anishinaabeg Community Council had approved the document, and we've been working hard at doing our final edits and the translation as national documents going out in English and in French. And that should be ready end of February, early March or so. We should be ready to release the document. The standards make a lot of recommendations. I'm going to skip this slide because it it's expanded to the next one. There's at least 80 recommendations at last count. There's 20 key recommendations really in the document. And first chapter is really about assessment of the community and asking First Nations to understand their community, who's there, how old are they going to be needing certain type of housing in the future, what housing will it be, as well, what are the natural resources in the community, what's the existing infrastructure like, what's the existing housing asset base like, just finding out more about the community basically, and trying to use that information to build on the rest of the document. Next, defining the roles and responsibilities of the participants. So we've defined primary participants as your chiefs and counselors, your lands staff members, housing, building staff, etc. And then the active participants are designers, builders, homeowners, tenants, and landlords. And some on that list you would think you'd have a say in, i.e. your tenants and potentially landlords, homeowners. But who are you as a community to say what the role and responsibilities of a builder or of a designer? We think you have the right to ask, and to define their roles and responsibilities. Same with the supportive participants. We're talking about public works, economic development, health, social services, education. All of these impact housing, they impact development in one way or another. Maybe not as much as lands, wood, and housing and public works, buildings, but certainly public works impacts housing in the delivery of infrastructure services, in the maintenance of the roads and the assets around, and in some cases in the maintenance of the homes themselves. And we did look at the roles of what we call structural participants. So these are banks, funding agencies, the fund, et cetera, and what their role is. Primarily, not that we're going to be able to redefine the role of the federal government in this case, but certainly if we understand better the role of the federal government, we'll be better able to work within those parameters. And then finally, identifying who needs training and where they can be trained, because in the end, it's nice to say, okay, well, this is what everyone's role and responsibility is, but how do we get that person up to that level, essentially? So what are the possibilities there? What are the options? Next chapter is on good governance, it's chapter 2. And that word's been bandied around for several years now. What does it mean to have good governance? And it starts at the top and works its way all the way to the bottom. So from chiefs and counselors right down to housing allocation and maintenance and that kind of thing. Then we have comprehensive community plans. What does it mean to have a comprehensive community plan? What is it that you're looking for? What is your vision statement? How do you develop these things? And I know many communities either are in the beginnings, the middle, the end of getting their CCP in order. And this document is meant to be a guide to know how to set up your CCP and what to ask of it, essentially, and what result you should be hoping to get from your CCP. Next, that land code, building code, and housing code. Many communities are working towards getting a land code in place. If that's the way you're proceeding, then what are the options there? What are the possibilities? One of the things that we think is really important that if you are able to implement and incorporate your building code and possibly some sort of planning or zoning regulations within your land code, then that will make that document or that regulation much easier to work with, and it'll make it easier to manage those other documents. So that's one of the things that we discuss. We have the concept that occupants need help. Many people, it's their first home, so they need help understanding how to maintain their house. It's everything from making sure that snow is removed properly from away from the house and driveways and things like that, and walks, but also leaves in gutters, looking for leaks in roofs and flashings around windows, etc. And then on the inside, similarly, are there leaks in the plumbing? What happens when there are leaks? What should we do about it? Who should we contact? That kind of thing. Or if it's a privately owned house, what are the good steps to repair? And why is it important to repair deficiencies before they get to become a problem, a larger problem? One of the recommendations as well is to review codes and regulations every 5 to 10 years. A regular review of documents will keep you up to date. Even within this document, as we're doing the final edits now, we're already editing ourselves. We found new information, we're finding revised information, and we're revising the document to suit the latest information. So that's really important. And last but not least, house construction insurance. Basically, when you're off reserve, most provinces have an insurance policy of some kind, whether an Ontario system for new housing, and on reserve there isn't such a thing. There is an agency looking into doing something similar. We think it's important that First Nation communities really consider insuring their homes. Part of the reason for that is if you've got an insurance, a contractor's insurance on the project, then the quality of construction should come up, because the insurance company is going to be the one that's going to make sure that the contractor does a good job. Simply, it's a market force thing. If the contractor is doing poorly, then it'll be more and more difficult for them to be insured, and therefore they'll be out of the picture eventually, or they'll improve their skills, right? So the market can help control that. What's the next steps with the standards? Atikameksheng has incorporated aspects of it. We'll hear more about that today, and they're going to continue to incorporate more aspects of the standards over the years. It's not a one-year project or two-year project. It's a really long-term project, and once you're done, you may need to start to revisit things. You know, it's something that is continues to evolve. Other First Nations, as we presented these documents across Canada, have asked us, you know, we want that. Can we adopt it as well? So there are other communities we expect will come online shortly and start to adopt the standards as it's made available, of course. And then some communities have expressed the needs for training, and the fund is working with communities to help them develop that capacity. So that's one more aspect. So now we're going to turn over the discussion to each chapter, and I'm going to have a brief introduction on each chapter, and then, well, we'll start with actually introducing the community, and then we'll have a brief introduction on each chapter, and then a discussion about the chapter itself. So first, I'd like to present Joanna Ruckalette from Anishinaabeg First Nation. So,
can I just talk? Can everybody hear me? Hi, my name is Joanna Ruckalette. I've been working with the Atikameksheng and Anishinaabeg for just about a year now. I'm their Director of Community Assistance. I'm responsible for the public works, lands, housing, community development, and education, and our Naganing program. So this was a surprise to me to do the presentation today, so I'm not as prepared as everybody else. Norma was originally supposed to do the presentation, but I was asked to just give a introduction on Atikameksheng. Not everybody's aware of our community. I should note that also I'm a member of Wikwemekong, so I didn't grow up in Atikameksheng. What I'd be sharing today is what I've learned from them over the past year, and some of the projects I've been working on with them. Next slide. So Atikameksheng is a First Nation just outside of Sudbury. We have a land base of about 43,000 acres. Right now our current membership is about 1,100, and a majority of our members live off reserve. Our on-reserve population consists of about 405, and that includes members and non-members. We have an administration office that consists of a finance and administration department, health and wellness department, and the community assistance department. Our staff is about 45, and I think we work well together, our team, so I think that's really important to have a good cooperative team to make things happen. Our housing unit, Norma, who's our housing manager, she takes care of 54 rental units, and that's challenging because she doesn't have an assistant with her, so that's something we have to deal with. She does have an asset maintenance worker who assists her. Of our housing stock, we have 74 that are privately owned by band members. Just recently, the community completed the construction of a 23-lot subdivision. Right now, we have about 12 of those lots built on or being built on. So right now, we're working on developing residential lot allocation policies to make sure we get that subdivision filled and built on. So some of the projects that the community has been working on, when I started last February, the community already had completed their comprehensive community plan. They already have a forestry management plan. They were just completing a library renovation. They completed a capital planning study back in 2001. They've also completed an aggregate study under for the First Nation. Also, right now, we're currently working on completing a land use plan with a consultant, and also we're working on our environmental law development. The community ratified the land code back in 2008, so that initiated some of these projects as well. We also have to complete our spousal real property. I'm sure a lot of other First Nations are working on that. We've had the First Nation Market Housing Fund help us with several policy developments. So we have a strong housing policy that was just completed. We worked with them on our IT and accounting training. Right now, we're doing a risk assessment and financial management plan through them. Also, we just completed our compensation and organizational review, so it was just examining our existing administration and how we can improve the staff and our salary grids. Also, the fund's helping us with the land use plan completion and the legal review of our draft zoning bylaws. Also, the fund's helping us with our legal review of our environmental law development and the legal review of the spousal real property law. Other things that the Tigmixing are working on right now is business park development and some lot allocation policies, building permit processes, and we're also working on completing our constitution. Some other things about Tigmixing is right now we have a municipal transfer agreement for our water supply, recycling, and our fire protection. And right now we're working on getting our solid waste management plan to have our waste collected and disposed of at the Sudbury landfill and close down our landfill. So yeah, that's a lot of the projects we've been working on right now and some of the things we have completed.
Okay. So thank you, Joanna. I'll just again give a brief description of Chapter 1, and then Joanna will speak to us about some of the content in Chapter 1. She sort of touched on it a little bit already. So first is understanding and knowing a community's needs. So that back to the idea that you assess your community starting generally with the demographics of the community. So who the people are, what their ages are, that kind of thing, their employment status, so that you can understand a little bit more about what the needs might be and what the advantages might be of using excuse me, understanding people's skills so that you can develop your programs relating to those skills. Excuse me, I have a tickle in my throat. Next, participants and their roles. So again, understanding, setting up defining, I guess, the participants and their understanding what their roles would be and their responsibilities would be, and I described that a little bit earlier. And the community's been working hard at getting some new job descriptions for many of their staff positions. And then finally, participant education and how you provide that training to the individuals in the community, whether it's staff members, chief and council, or the general population in itself. Oops. We'll stick with that for now.
So Chapter 1 of the standards involves assessing the needs of your community. So Tigmixing has done that previously through their capital planning study and their comprehensive community planning study, and currently in their land use planning. So these studies were completed except for the land use plan. We're working on that right now. But in the capital planning study, they look at what the existing population is, what their existing needs are, and in regards to infrastructure. And then in that study, they look at the demographics and figure out what the community's needs are going to be in the future. Like, what is the population of the age of the elders, and is a daycare going to be required? Some of these things are also addressed in our comprehensive community planning study. Not as detailed as we wanted it to be, but it's also examined again in our land use plan. Hopefully we'll capture the things that we missed from those studies. From the comprehensive community plan, we noticed that we had a lot of single members who didn't have housing and were kind of just overcrowding existing family units. So from that, we identified that we needed to make sure there was like bachelor apartments or single homes available. And then from that, the Tigmixing constructed a fourplex consisting of 4 one-bedroom units. Also, I believe they've already developed a elders independent living center. So that's a building for the elders to go and live in who don't need assistance, who are able to live on their own. Those two service things weren't working together, and based on recommendations from the capital planning study, they got rid of the groundwater supply and got a water connection to the city of Sudbury. So now the entire community is serviced with water main, and they remained on the septic tank and field bed systems. Using the old way, the groundwater, it was susceptible to contamination from the field bed systems. Also, I lost my train of thought. A capital planning study. So it was, it's a 20-year plan, which was done back in 2001, and unfortunately we're only at the first phase, well, the first 5 years of it. We haven't implemented a lot of the other recommendations in there, so that's something we're working on right now. The capital planning study planned for about 100 new residential lots, and to this point we only have 23 built so far. So that's one of our goals, is to get our residential lot subdivisions developed. Also, in our, so right now we're working on our land use plan. In there, it's been, we've been working on it for maybe 3 years now, and unfortunately it should have been done a lot sooner. Right now we're kind of having issues in the community where people are putting up businesses in residential areas, and we're having backlash from community members saying, well, I don't want this business in my neighborhood. So this is, yes, a really important document that we got to get done. So yeah, just you got to understand the needs of your community to know what you're planning for, right? So hopefully we're going to have our land use plan done this year. Another tool we use to assess the needs of our community is the asset condition reporting system, which everybody does every 3 years, so that helps us keep track of our infrastructure. What else am I forgetting here?
Job descriptions?
Oh, also, yeah. So with our administration, we recently completed our organizational and compensation review. So we had a consultant come in and help us assess what our staff is currently undertaking, and they did interviews with each staff to get an idea of the work they're doing and make sure that the job description that they're following is matching what they're actually doing. And then we also updated our salary grids to match the work that the staff are doing. So just to make sure everybody's properly compensated, and yeah, and just making sure, assessing at the duties and making sure we have the right qualifications identified. So it was really helpful, and there was some happy staff and some staff who were not so happy with the recommendations from that project, but I think overall it had to be done.
And then any training coming up?
Any training? Yeah, we have, we're looking at some GIS training for our lands staff. Also, we're looking at managers training. We realized that was something that was required because of a lot of staff previously, before I got there, had just been thrown into the role of manager, which was they kind of weren't given a choice, but at the same time they weren't given the training. So now we're looking at remedying that by getting the training in place for them and to make sure they're able to do their jobs properly and effectively.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that so far? Nope, all right. So we'll move right ahead. I'm going to introduce Jennifer Martin. She's the policy coordinator at Member 2, and she'll describe her community a little bit, and then she'll describe to us what they've been doing in Chapter 2, or some of the aspects of Chapter 2. Yes, sir.
Hello. Okay, my name is Jennifer Martin from Member 2, as Francis said. I'm a band member with Member 2, born and raised. I've been working for Member 2 for 12 years now, and the past 7 or 8 in the role of policy coordinator. Before that, I worked as a finance officer and a quality assurance coordinator. Member 2 is located in Nova Scotia, Cape Breton Island. Okay, so I'm just going to go, this is an outline of what I'm going to talk about. I'll tell you a bit about Member 2, some general housing stats, a blurb on our land tenure. Francis will tell you about what's involved in Chapter 2. Then I'll start speaking about some of our experiences with the content of Chapter 2. Okay, so we're an urban Mi'kmaq community. We have over 1,400 band members, approximately 900 on reserve, so that leaves about 500 off reserve. And we're in the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, where there's about 100,000 people. We're part of the Unama'ki district of, Mi'kmaq is our traditional territory. And yeah, Unama'ki is the Mi'kmaq word for Cape Breton, which is the island we're located on. Our past, most of our past has been marginalized. We were, I guess I'd say, a very poor First Nation. We had limited education and employment on reserve. We didn't have water, sewer, paved roads until the 1960s. We didn't open our band office until the 70s sometime. I think it was the mid-70s, actually. And in the 80s and 90s, we've had 2 failed business attempts. So in 1994, we had a $1 million budget with $1 million deficit on a $4 million budget. Payroll was week to week. I hear stories about times where we would lay people off because we couldn't make payroll, the weekly payroll. So we had really high unemployment, 80%, and most of the jobs that were in Member 2 were either working for the band administration or another Mi'kmaq organization. So we get into the late 90s, and we had a few key developments that helped with our economic development. There's in 1999 and 2001, there was a Supreme Court of Canada case, the Marshall case, and what came out of that was an interim fishery agreement with Department of Fisheries and Oceans. In 2000, we signed a gaming agreement with the province of Nova Scotia, and this agreement allowed Member 2 to operate video lottery terminals on reserve and hold monster bingo games. So we started that, and then in 2001 we became ISO 9001 certified. We started with 5 of our departments being certified, and then since then we've added another 13 departments as we've grown. Here are a few stats from some of our previous numbers to some of our numbers today. I have to apologize, the numbers are a little bit dated for today. In 1980, we were 65 acres, now we're over 500. I believe that's even higher because we've been consistently purchasing municipal lands adjacent to Member 2. So I'm almost positive in saying we're over 500 acres. 65 houses in 1980, and now we're over 340. The band membership, 333 in 1980, and we're over 1,400 now. our government revenue, I know it's the majority of our revenue comes from own source revenue. And the employees, 50 employees back in 2000, we do have over 700 at our peak season. So we've listed some of our commercial operations there. We have a trade center, the gaming commission, entertainment center. We have a heritage park, an insurance company, Hampton Inn and Suites, member to Geomatics Consultants, fisheries department. And of course, we have all of the government departments, your education, social, finance, HR, IT departments. We have a radio station and, yeah, the quality assurance and ISO compliance department too. So a few of our current projects that we're working on. The governance committee is working on a land code, a matrimonial real property law, citizenship code, and environmental management plan. I'll talk more about those a little bit later. The construction of the Member to Sport and Wellness Center has begun, and that's scheduled to open in 2016. Member to Commercial Realty, we're developing a commercial development. We're calling it Churchill Crossing. It's right off the highway. And the Financial Management System Certificate. We were recently audited by the First Nations Financial Management Board. So some general housing stats. Like I said, 340 plus housing units. This includes single detached houses and apartment units. The age and life expectancy varies depending on the tenant or the homeowner. And we have wait lists for our housing, temporary and permanent. Both of those numbers are over 100. Our housing department has recently undergone some changes. They used to be joined with Public Works. Now they're two separate departments. In housing, we ended up with 5 people. The director, a renovations manager, maintenance person, admin assistant, and the council portfolio holder. Since then, we've hired a couple more maintenance people. And we have a couple of support people in the finance department, like the finance officer and recently hired tenant relations officer. So for privately owned units, this includes Section 10 and houses built under the First Nations Market Housing Fund. There might be 16 units now, actually. Certificates of possession, 55 units we've issued CPs for, and that may have grown also. I haven't updated that number this year. Oh, the 13 pending, there we go. So some of those might already be certificates. Member to owned units are just units where there are no CPs issued, and there are 249 of those, and rent is charged for 211 units. And the reason that's different is because once a mortgage is retired, we no longer charge rent for the unit, and there may not be a CP issued for that house or apartment. Land tenure system. Yeah, so we are one of the First Nations who issue certificates of possession, and right now we do manage our lands under the Indian Act, and we are developing a land code, but we've pretty much done what we want anyway, and the land code is just formalizing that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. So I'll just take a few minutes to describe what's in Chapter 2, then I'll ask Jennifer to describe some of the things that they've encountered and some of the hurdles perhaps and successes, of course. So first section in Chapter 2, establishing good governance principles for development. So we're really talking here about is making sure that there are good governance principles, regulations in place for chiefs and councillors, for housing, public works, et cetera, all of the different departments within the community. And it leads all the way to housing allocation, housing maintenance, rent and collection of rents and arrears, and all of those rules and regulations relating to governance, both of the larger government entity and smaller focus, I guess, being on housing. Strategies for community development, really about CCPs and community visions and things like that, and how a community will strive to develop those to identify themselves and to have something to look forward to, basically saying this is our goal, this is what we want to achieve in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, etc. And then planning First Nation communities, including planning the design of the communities, and just you'll see some repetition with Chapter 4, and it's primarily that Chapter 2 is about setting up the mechanisms, the regulations, the processes, whereas Chapter 4 is about examples of those processes and regulations, etc. So again, I'll turn it over to Jennifer to describe some of these for us.
Okay. Okay, so, hello. I have a couple of slides to help get going with this, this chapter. I've outlined some of the roles of people involved in housing. So the role of Member 2's Chief and Council is to allocate housing, approve the housing budget, approve the policies and programs, and they also approve the repair and renovation requests that come in, and they hear appeals. The Housing Department, they do the day-to-day operations based on the policy that was approved. The Public Works Department, they provide all of the infrastructure for Member 2. The Finance Department, they do the day-to-day financials. There are no, I guess, checks cut and stuff like that in our Housing Department. Everything goes through the Finance Department. And the Finance Department does all the financial reporting also. The Administration Department, where I fall under, we do the policy development. And then we have a housing working group, which I chair. It's a group made up of representatives from the different departments that affect housing. Like we have representatives from, well, administration, housing, public works, social department, and chief and council. So we have, did I say the finance department? Yeah, finance department anyway. But it's 1 or 2 employees from each of those departments and what the Housing Working Group does is it allows us to communicate between departments so that one knows what the other is doing. And we provide advice to Chief and Council on different programs and changes to programs and stuff like that. Rent. Okay, yes, we only started charging rent in 1987. So it's been a while. Yeah, so we charge $500 to $550, with Member 2 providing a 50% subsidy for those who are working, and those who are unemployed, social picks up the tab anyway. So they pay the $500 to $550 on their behalf. And recently, with the help of the fund, we've started building homes using the fund's credit enhancement program. And rent for these homes are a bit more. They're $600 to $650, and they're based on the square footage of the home. So the larger home, of course, is $650. And Member 2 doesn't provide a subsidy the way we do with our other housing program. So a housing assistance application process. We've recently developed a housing application form. Before, we just had band members writing to Chief and Council requesting a house, and this is why I think I deserve a house, that sort of thing, without all of the details that we needed to better plan for housing. So we developed a housing application form to help us collect that information. We hired a tenant relations officer to oversee that process also and work with Chief and Council when they're allocating those houses. But for repairs and renovations, band members continue to write letters to Chief and Council. So one of our next projects is to develop an application form for repairs and renovations and have a similar process to that, for that. Okay, that's the end of my slides. So when we're talking about good governance, one of the other things we have is we've started developing new Chief and Council policies. And it's not that we didn't have the policies in place, they just weren't documented before. For example, we have a conflict of interest policy, and our chief and council and our employees have followed it ever since I can remember. And we went through the exercise of documenting our process, and we have what I think is a really good conflict of interest policy. Yeah, we're developing the land code, like I said, and as we're going along, we're developing the accompanying laws and processes that we're going to need once this land code is ratified. I think when we were going around asking people about their experience with the land code, what we heard was that there's at least 20 to 30 accompanying policies or procedures or laws that you would need once your land code is ratified. So while we're waiting for this ratification process, we're continuing to develop those documents too. We have a zoning bylaw. Well, I wouldn't call it a bylaw. It's a zoning bylaw, a zoning policy that we developed alongside our land use plan. The land use plan, when we started that, it was based on a community plan from 2004. So in addition to being a land use plan, it does have a few components of a community plan within it. So we just developed that document back in 2014. Okay, there were a couple we developed the land use, it's a big project. We developed the land use plan, the zoning bylaw, how they're implemented, and a residential construction standards policy all at the same time. So it's a big project, and sometimes I don't know where to start with it. But we started having discussions in 2011, late 2011. We received a proposal January 2012, and we had a timeline. We were going to finish this by September of 2012. Well, September of 2012 came and went, and these documents weren't finished. So it wasn't until July of 2013 that we actually finished these documents. And I think there were reasons for the delays. Some of them, we had poor turnout to the community sessions because, in the development of these documents too, we made it mandatory. Chief and council did, actually. They wanted to get community input for these documents. They didn't want to develop the documents and then give them to the community. They wanted the community to give input while they were being developed. So that's what we did. But there were times when we felt we didn't have enough people. Chief and council didn't feel we had enough people turn out to these sessions. So we would stop the process and go back and try to find ways to get more people out to these sessions so that we can continue with the project. So that was part of our holdup. Then sometimes getting to meet with chief and council was a chore in itself. They meet every so often, and trying to get yourself on the agenda, it's kind of hard some days. So that was another problem. The housing working group, getting those group of people together to provide advice, that turned out to be a challenge at times too. Understaffed departments, especially housing. Then there's the competing priorities. I mean, if you have something else going on in the community at the time, you can't have a bunch of different things going on. So sometimes the work we were doing with these documents took a back seat. And then of course, there's the weather. I mean, there were a couple of times we had to cancel sessions for bad weather. So I mean, we did have challenges in finishing these documents, but we felt it was really important to keep going and to finish them. So that's what we did. It took a few extra months, but we got it done. So that was good. The residential construction standards policy, though, when that was done, we had another look at it, and we felt it wasn't something that we could release to our membership right away. We needed more work done on it. So this began another project. So we started talking about this in April of 2014. So after a couple months in July, we received a proposal and a work plan We were going to start early August, finish this in September. September came and went, and we ended up finishing the project in December. And we broke it into 3 documents, one for chief and council, one for the community, and one for the administration. And those documents are more suitable for member 2, and we can give the various documents to the people who need them without all of the additional information that they won't need. So those are some of the projects we've worked on. Something else we learned that you should ask for when you're developing these projects. If you enlist the help of a consultant, a lot of times you hear about consultants coming in and developing a document, a policy document or something, and then it sits on the shelf and you don't implement it. What I've been doing recently is asking for an implementation plan as part of the development of that document, so that when the consultant leaves, you still have a plan that you can implement yourself to go forward and make sure that document doesn't collect dust. What else? I think I mentioned a governance committee.
No, you didn't actually.
I didn't?
I want you to expand on it, actually.
Oh, okay, that's what I was gonna do. About 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago, our chief and council started on the road to developing a citizenship code and a land code. We realized it was a really big project that our policy review team couldn't handle. So we created a governance department and we hired a governance coordinator. And what the governance coordinator does is works with the community to train them on these, I guess not train them, educate them on what's involved in a citizenship code and a land code. And they're a group of community members being facilitated by the governance coordinator to provide input into these documents. Like the land code that I talked about, that was developed by the governance committee, and the governance committee is made up of community members. So all along, that whole process involved community members providing input, going line by line through this land code, and then presenting it to chief and council. So, yeah, they thought that was important, and so do I. I mentioned we have a tenant relations officer. That's a fairly recent position in member 2. Part of their job is to provide training and counseling to homeowners or potential homeowners. So even last week, one of the projects our tenant relations officer was working on is the basic home maintenance course for some band members who have recently built houses or are interested in building a house. And another part of her job is collecting the rents. We weren't actively collecting, well, I shouldn't say we weren't actively collecting rents, but it was the arrears that we weren't chasing after hard enough. But with the TR, tenant relations officer, on board, our housing arrears have gone way down. I don't know the exact numbers, but we were talking the other day, and I think 3 years ago, our housing arrears were something like $100,000 in a fiscal year. Since then, that's gone down to 80. It's gone down to 40, and I believe we're just under 20 for this fiscal year coming up if things keep going the way they're going. So, I mean, the addition of this person to the finance department, like to support housing, has been amazing. Did I forget anything?
One question.
Okay.
The reaction of the community members when you were approaching some of these things.
Can you come to the microphone? So
Hi, my name is Jessica. I'm too short. Oh my god. I'm from Anishinaabe Nation. My question is to you, Jennifer. You said that your public works department did all infrastructure developments.
Yes.
What kind of role do you see like the Atlantic Policy Congress taking in infrastructure developments in member two? Like, do you guys work with the Atlantic Policy Congress or like in infrastructure developments and housing? Because on their website it says you do. I just wondered what their role was and what you thought their role was.
I think from my understanding, the Atlantic Policy Congress, they provide training and workshops and information for First Nations, and Member 2 does take part in those workshops and the training. But they don't, the APC doesn't actually do the work, I guess. They train us to do the work or help share information. Okay. Okay.
I just want to know how your community members reacted as you were proposing new rules and regulations. What was the overall community reaction? How did you get them to come to meetings? Were there any strategies that you employed? And you mentioned how your chief and council seems to be generally hands-off and they know their role. So maybe if you can expand on that a little bit.
Okay. So, the community's reaction. We went to the community when we were developing or making changes to our housing policy, and there were some of the things that they weren't very fond of, but they were things that they were supportive of, and the major thing I think we took to them was the collection of rental arrears or housing arrears, and we were surprised that the majority of people who came out to the meeting were in support of Member 2 aggressively collecting those arrears. So that's, I mean, when that happened, we took that to council and council gave their support, and that's kind of how we hired the tenant relations officer and gave her the mandate to collect these outstanding housing arrears. So I guess it depends on the topic, really. But the band members who come out do provide input. And I'd mentioned before that we did have trouble getting people out sometimes. So some of the things we've used to get people out are door prizes. We've had surveys, and if you complete the survey, you get entered into a draw for like a TV or an iPad mini or something like that, or a gift card. And we feed them. We have a buffet supper, so we try to lure people there with food, and that works sometimes. I think that's all of our tricks that we use to get people to come out. And incentives, that's the word.
Combining topics.
Oh, combine, yes, okay. Deborah reminded me of something. We used to hold different sessions, like one night we'd talk about the land code, another night we'd talk about the matrimonial property law, another night we'd talk about another law. But we used to get people coming in like every night asking questions about all the different topics. So we thought, hey, wait a minute, this different topic every night thing isn't working. So we went and we combined the different topics into like one session. So it was just a little bit of everything to get people interested and providing feedback. And sometimes people would stick around afterwards and ask questions of the presenters. And so we found that worked really well too. Better than the individual topic per night.
And keeping chief and council from meddling.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Back in the day, we've I've worked with chief and council, and we developed policies, I guess, just within the organization without getting community feedback, and it didn't always work. The community didn't have any input into it, so they had no buy-in, and they had no reason to support this policy or law or whatever document we were creating. And the administration and chief and council realized this, and to fix it, they said, no, whatever we develop, we want community input so that they're part of the process, and they have the buy-in, and they can go out to their families and tell them what we've been doing and how we're asking for their input and actually using the input in the development of these documents. So,
Any other questions? Floor?
I was just going to ask, I noticed that you said you had over 700 employees. Is that from the band itself? And is there, so there would be other employed people, other jobs available through the subsidiary businesses? And
yeah, I had the 2 slides up there with all of our government operations and all of our commercial operations. The 700 employees is between all of those different departments and businesses that we run.
Okay.
So they had 700 for all of that.
Short too. Okay, I'm from Constance Lake First Nation in Ontario. I sit as the board chairperson for housing. And my question was, you were talking about CPs. Right now, we're going to be having 40 units that are going to be paid off. And how did you go about getting your CPs? Is it through INAC? Did they approve it, or did you just gave them like that? That's where we are right now. We're kind of, because we have one band member, his house is all paid off, and he's requesting a CP, and that's where we're kind of stuck. So with you going through the process, we like to learn from what you've done.
Okay, our example isn't the best, but what we do, we have the lots surveyed, like by a Canada Land surveyor, and I think we use a BCR and request to NHC that they issue the certificate of possession for that piece of land to such and such person. And the reason I say we're not the best example of this is because we have people from different departments doing bits and pieces of what a land manager should be doing. We're in the process of creating a lands department and hiring a lands manager with the development of our land code. But from what I understand, the process is to have the lot surveyed by Canada Land Surveyor, do the BCR, send it to NHC, and they should reply with a CP.
Thank you.
And more questions? Okay, you guys have anything to add, or? So we're running a little early, that's very rare. Let me see. Yeah, we were supposed to break at 2:45. I think we'll break now, unless someone else has a question, we'll break now. And we'll start up again at 3 o'clock. Is there a question?
Mm-hmm.
The question is to housing market fund First Nation Commando. To qualify, I guess, to make an application of First Nations to get in that housing market fund, what is the criteria that we have to meet for application to be in that approval of the application for the fund? And I guess another question would be is the band itself, I guess the leadership, have to make a signatory or MLG approval if an individual band member requests for a loan to build a house or to renovate by themselves? Who signs that jurisdiction? The leadership?
Good question, Charles. I was hoping that would come at the end of the presentation, but you're asking it now, so I'll answer. The criteria that we generally base on is does the First Nation have sufficient other revenues to safely back their own loans and mortgages. And certainly when we look at that, we do look at 3 pillars: good financial management, good governance, and a community commitment to this approach. And so in your community, where you've made the application, you've passed the criteria or the test in terms of having an ability to safely back your own loans and mortgages. Now, in terms of our agreement between the fund and the First Nations, there's 2 agreements. One is really to say, yes, we agree with this approach, and we will take on the responsibility of guaranteeing our own loans and mortgages for our band members. So you really replace the ministerial loan guarantee through that process on the merit of the strength of your own First Nation having an ability to back your own loans and mortgages. So that's really how you qualify with the fund, and with the idea that the fund, for every dollar that is spent by the First Nation in the guarantee, the fund will back that loan 10%. And so in that regard, we work with the lenders who are willing to provide some pretty good deals for First Nations in terms of lower interest rates and so forth. So from that point, we are hoping that a lot of First Nations will take advantage of our ability to use our $300 million trust fund to leverage more financing for housing. So the agreement that we enter into is really what we call an indemnity agreement that says that the First Nation accepts this approach and will guarantee their own loans and mortgages for their band members.
So to understand this application housing market fund, First Nations, I understand. I think that there's no subsidy, right? You on your own?
There is no subsidy in that we are not CMHC providing social housing, but certainly when we take a look at rent projects, we recognize there is a way to make the houses more affordable. And in that way, some communities are looking at putting their own subsidy in place, and some are looking at putting more equity up front to make the housing more affordable for their members in terms of the rental projects. In terms of the the mortgages for individual home ownership, we recognize that the banks might only ask for 5% down, but you yourself as one who's borrowing might want to put more down to make those monthly payments lower. So there's 2 or 3 different ways to attack the issue of the lack of subsidy.
So I heard that we need 3 pillars. So if a First Nation question makes an application, it's on third party, it's no deal?
We have, that depends. We have a number of our First Nations who are on what they call remedial action plans. And if they're unrelated to housing, certainly we would look at that on a case-by-case basis. So we don't say no in those instances, but certainly it's really looking at their ability to safely back their own loans and mortgages as the main criteria.
Okay, me good.
Okay. Just to add to that, we certainly will work with any community that will pass a BCR to work with us, and certainly the benefit, of course, is our capacity development. And certainly in that regard, much of what we've talked about here in terms of supporting First Nations to get themselves more investment ready, that's really what the fund is all about as well.
All right, thank you. So as I was mentioning earlier, we'll begin the second half of the presentation for Chapter 3 and 4 at 3 o'clock because other sessions will be terminating at that point, and people maybe want to transfer back into this one. So let's see you all back here at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Did I not talk long enough?
I was trying to, please talk more, please talk.